Good morning. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself. My name is Opik Prasetyo, and here I will present my article with the title Improving Student Scientific Writing Skill Through Discovery Learning, a Systematic Review. The author of this article is first me, Opik Prasetyo, and then the second one is Dr. Bawa Sugiarto as my advisor, and the third one is Dr. Halita as my advisor. Okay, first, the introduction. The fundamental goal of science learning is to develop the student ability to practice science in real life. Science learning must be carried using a student-centered scientific approach with demand for mastery of 21st century skills that consisting of four domains, such as literacy, inventive thinking, effective communication, and high productivity. This four domain can be presented in the form of scientific writing as a result of empowering science process skill. Science writing skill can be defined as the form of communication skill that facilitates the student to express their idea or thought and build the understanding of science. The result of the observation that conducted in Soloraya shown that scientific writing skill of the student in senior high school are still relatively low. The observation results shown that the students have difficulty in formulating hypotheses and then drawing up the experimental procedure and then drawing up the conclusion according to the relevant data and explaining the advantages and limitation of the experiment. One solution that can be applied by the teacher to improve the student's scientific writing skill is to implement the learning model that practice science process skill for the students. The learning model that have this characteristic is discovery learning. So, this should be carried out that systematic review to analyze a various articles that relate to the implementation of the discovery learning model to improve student scientific writing skill. Second method, in the systematic review, we use PRISMA method that consists of 5 steps. The first one is defining the literature eligibility criteria. The second one is defining the source of information. The source of the information they use in the research is come from the Scopus online database. And then the third one is literature selection or screening. To search any information from the Scopus, we use two keywords, that is about the writing skill and the discovery learning. And then the fourth is data collection, and then the fifth is data selection. And then the result of this discussion, the result of the literature selection using the PRISMA method are described in the following scheme. Next is the article distribution in the last 10 years. As we know that in 2013, 2018, and 2021, there's only one article that describes about the implementation of discovery learning in improving student writing skill. And then in 2017 and 2020, there are two articles that describe about the implementation of discovery learning to improve student scientific writing skill. But in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2022, and 2023, there is no article that describe about these issues. Based on the analysis of each article, we can show in general that each article that describe about the implementation of the discovery learning model can be able to improve student scientific writing skill. For example, in the first article with the title of Student-Driven Curriculum Embedded Undergraduate Research Experience in the Senior Chemistry Curriculum and its Impact on Students. The result of this analysis on this article is the curriculum embedded undergraduate research experience that implement discovery learning in chemistry course can positively build student expertise in analytical instrumentation, improve research and writing field, and provide support to students in developing research questions and laboratory protocols. So we can conclude that this implementation of discovery learning in the learning process has the potential to build student scientific writing skill. Now, so the second article, the third article, fourth until the seventh article shown that the implementation of the discovery learning model in the science learning can improve the student scientific writing skill. Okay, next. The learning activities done by the student in each step of the discovery learning also reflect the instructional events based on the cognitive learning theory and show the cognitive process experienced by the student to gain knowledge. For example, in the table 2, we can see the integration of the cognitive instructional event and cognitive process in discovery learning syntax. The first instructional event based on the cognitive theory is gain attention. In this process, the teacher will provide stimuli to ensure that the incoming instruction is received by the student. The cognitive process, the experience by the student is perception, and it can be done by the teacher in the orientation syntax of discovery learning. The next instructional event and also cognitive process in each syntax of discovery learning can be seen in the table 2. Okay, the next is the relationship between the discovery learning syntax, scientific writing component, and scientific writing skill criteria. First, the orientation. In this step, the students are given the stimulation to develop their ideas related to the problem or the topic. The learning activities on this step include observing the problem, exploring the information about the problem, and making connection between their existing knowledge with the current problems. These learning activities are useful for the students to read the introduction on the scientific report. The criteria that needed by the student to write the good introduction are the context and the accuracy. And then the second is hypothesis generation. The learning activities on this step are the student must formulate hypotheses based on the previous problem. This activity supports the student in writing the hypothesis on the experimental report. The criteria of writing skill to formulate a good hypothesis are the hypothesis must be testable and scientific merit. The third one is the hypothesis testing. On this step, the student must design and carry out the experiment that tests the hypothesis, collect data from the experiment, and interpret the result. This learning activity supports the student in writing experimental methods. The criteria for the scientific writing skill in developing a good experimental methods are determining the appropriate variables and appropriate experimental design that can test the hypothesis. The fourth is the conclusion step. The learning activities carried out by the student in this step is to review the hypothesis based on the evidence or data from the experimental process. This learning activity can help the student for writing result and discussion in the experimental report. The criteria for writing a good result include data selection, data presentation, and statistical analysis. And then, the criteria for writing a good discussion in the experimental report are conclusion must be based on data, must be alternative explanation, must be limitation of the data of the design, and the significance of the research. Fifth, learning activity at the regulation step. The learning activity at the regulation step include determining the goals and how to achieve the goals, and then monitoring and evaluating the step. This activity can help the student to determine the primary literature and writing quality based on the experiment. The criteria in selecting primary literature are reasonable and relevant. And well, the criteria to determine the writing quality can be seen from the suitability of grammar, word usage, and the organization of writing percentage. Okay, the last one is the conclusion. So, based on the literature review with the Prisma method, it can be concluded that the implementation of the discovery learning model can improve student scientific writing skill. This is because the learning experience obtained by the student in each syntax of the discovery learning model is related to the cognitive instructional event, so that the student can experience a series of cognitive processes to gain knowledge. Each learning activity in the syntax of the discovery learning model is also aligned with the component of the scientific writing, such as student experimental report, so that they can practice and improve the various criteria for scientific writing skills that have been mentioned. So thank you. That's all my presentation.